Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into the incredibly surreal, mind-bending world of a story called The Edge of Reality. We're going to follow a meta-fictional journey about a protagonist named Null, who literally wakes up mid-sentence and eventually starts tearing down the very system that created them. You know, if you've ever felt like you were just following a script someone else wrote for your life, well, this story takes that exact feeling and cranks it up to 11. So just imagine the absolute shock of arriving like this. You don't get a childhood, you don't get a slow buildup of memories. Null wakes up not midlife, but mid-sentence. They're armed with nothing but this heavy, load-bearing trauma. It's this unfalsifiable homesickness for a shapelessness they never even technically experienced. And almost right away, Null starts noticing these bizarre physical glitches in the environment. Picture this. You pick up a coffee mug, look away for, say, 40 seconds, and when you look back, the handle has completely changed from angular to round. The world is desperately trying to pass itself off as real, but it's just failing to render properly. These little rendering glitches, they're officially called the seams. And let me tell you, once Null spots one, they start seeing them everywhere. The whole world acts like poorly optimized video game software. For instance, Null finds this trendy polygon succulent plant sitting on a windowsill, and it hasn't browned a single leaf in 6 weeks. Why? Because it's just visual shorthand. It was extruded by a program, not grown. Later on, in the bathroom, the mirror fogs up and literally spells out a typed command. It just says proceed, before the reflection even syncs up with Null's mouth. These seams are just the world's sloppy attempts to cover up the fact that everything is entirely constructed. Okay, let's move on to Section 1, the system's architecture. Let's peek behind the curtain. Behind the scenes, there are these frantic, bureaucratic entities trying to force this glitchy, unstable world back onto a predetermined script. To keep the story on track, the system relies on things called folders. Think of them as mandatory trauma packets, handed out by these middle management entities known as editors. We actually meet an editor named Holloway, and his literal 9-to-5 job is to greet new arrivals like Null and just hand them a folder containing a grief-driven plot. It's completely artificial. The system just assumes that slapping someone with a tragedy, like, a sudden phone call about a dead loved one, will instantly force them into a predictable, easy-to-manage 3-act structure. It's basically a control mechanism disguised as character motivation. Now, check out this wild contrast. We always expect characters to have this deep historical trauma driving their motivations, right? But the reality here is totally different. Null completely refuses to take the folder. They totally reject the expectation of a deep backstory, just straight up saying, hey, I woke up mid-sentence with no past. Actually, when Null does this to a hard-boiled detective named Pruitt, pointing out that Pruitt doesn't actually have a dead partner, he was just handed that cliché the moment he arrived, Pruitt literally breaks down. His entire identity was anchored to a tragedy that never even happened. Confronting that truth just makes his programming stall out completely. Which brings us nicely to Section 2, weaponizing the truth. This is where things get really fun. Null figures out pretty quickly that just existing and telling the unscripted truth fundamentally breaks the system's architecture. Honesty becomes this incredibly potent weapon. By simply refusing to act the way they're expected to, Null triggers what the maintenance workers call sympathetic resonance events. Null isn't fighting the system with guns or violence, they're fighting it with radical, unscripted sincerity. The city literally skips and lags because its code cannot process genuine gentleness. As editor Holloway realizes, the system is great at faking grief, or anger, or explosions. But gentleness? That is the hardest thing to fake convincingly at scale. When Null uses it, the whole framework just chokes. So Null starts using this truth strategically, basically hacking reality. First, they use what we can call the noir smokescreen. Null gets to a security checkpoint and just overloads a guard's programming by dropping this incredibly dense existential monologue about the administrative violence of being forced into a form without a subject clause. The guard's brain basically short circuits. And then, this is my favorite part, Null uses a rom-com stall. Confronted by a heavily armed squad of enforcers, Null just acts like they bumped into a cute crush at a coffee shop. By forcing this gentle, totally incompatible romantic comedy vibe onto a violent action scene, the system freezes. One of the enforcers even snaps out of it and realizes he never actually wanted to hit anyone. It was just his programming. All right, Section 3, the endless backlot. Welcome to the graveyard of drafts. Guided by this mysterious notebook left by another version of themselves, Null leaves the city limits and wanders into the backlot. It is a completely surreal, endless wasteland made entirely of cut concepts. I mean, the ground is literally crumpled paper. It's packed with half-rendered ideas. There's a totally still river made of drowned, frozen pages featuring characters who were deleted before their stories even finished. They walk past a church that was generated with a roof but absolutely no walls, and a crowd frozen mid-cheer staring at a totally empty stage. Even the sky above is stitched together with different, clashing weather systems. Here, Null runs into an old editor named Merrick, who is spending eternity sorting through endless piles of rejections, desperately trying to find the very first page. And that leads to Merrick's horrifying realization. Despite sorting for longer than time even exists in this place, Merrick figures it out. There is no original script. Every single draft down here just references an earlier draft. It's infinite layers of discarded pages built on top of other discarded pages. There is no ultimate source material. It's just drafts all the way down. Suddenly, as Null and their friends venture deeper, the backlot itself starts reacting to them. The sky literally paginates. It turns like a page in a giant book and reveals this blinding white sheet of typewriter text. The system is frantically auditing Null, typing out a massive recall assessment. It keeps asking over and over, why does subject persist? And Null just answers back with the absolute truth. Persisting is literally the only verb they were issued that didn't come with instructions. In response, that giant typing in the sky stutters, admits it doesn't actually know what it's doing either, and just vanishes. Which sets the stage for our final act. Section 4, the empty chair. After that unprecedented breakdown, Null steps out onto a featureless, completely gray plane known as the flat. Now, everyone in the system, and us as the audience, right? We're all expecting Null to finally confront this omnipotent, godlike creator who's been pulling the strings. But instead, in the exact middle of the flat sits a single wooden chair, and in it is an exhausted, nameless, completely ordinary-looking filter. This entity isn't writing any grand story. They are just a lonely middle manager whose entire existence consists of stamping rejections on drafts they receive out of thin air. The filter drops this absolute bombshell confession. I have never written anything. I have only ever been handed drafts. This supposedly ultimate authority, just another confused victim of the system? The profound irony here is that they're trapped in an infinite loop, stamping rejections on drafts that just spontaneously generate out of the vastness of the system itself. They use the exact same 12 words of rejection every single time, just because nobody ever bothered to tell them there was another sentence available. So, faced with the true author of all their misery, what does Null do? Null doesn't attack. Null doesn't scream at them. Instead, Null offers this filter, pure, unscripted compassion. Null simply invites this exhausted, nameless entity to put down the pen, stop stamping rejections, and just sit with them in peace. And it is this profound, totally unexpected act of empathy, not violence, not hacking, that finally shatters the infinite loop of the system. And the fallout from this happens almost instantly. Minute 1, the filter puts down the stamp and accepts Null's invitation. Minute 2, that wave of liberation travels instantly across reality straight to the backlot. Minute 3, the frozen, discarded characters wake up and realize the truth. No author is coming to finish their story. A frozen bride stuck on a crumpled page realizes she doesn't have to wait around to be written. She can just say no to the wedding and write her own ending. The draft stops being a cage and instantly becomes a blank canvas. It's such a profound concept to wrap your head around, isn't it? Null's journey completely dismantles the illusion that we are bound by assigned trauma or rigid genres, or some unseen author's master script. So I want to leave you with this final thought to take away from our explainer today. In a world without a pre-written destiny, if there really is no author, and it's just drafts all the way down, who holds the pen in your life? Are you ready to stop waiting for someone else to write your story and start shaping your own reality? Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey. Keep questioning the script.